The neighborhood had always felt like a quiet, predictable place where nothing unusual ever happened. Families walked their dogs in the afternoon, sprinklers clicked on at sunset, and children rode their bikes along the sidewalks without ever bothering anyone. It was the kind of suburban calm that made people forget how quickly peace could shatter. But that illusion of normalcy began to crack on a warm Saturday morning, the moment two children simply stepped outside to play. Their mother had assumed it was safe. She had chosen this neighborhood specifically because it looked peaceful, because it seemed like the sort of place where children could laugh freely without judgment. But she didn't know then that someone always watches in a community like this, someone who believes themselves the unofficial rule enforcer, regardless of whether the rules apply. And on that day, that someone was a neighbor infamous for her sharp tongue, her relentless complaints, and her extraordinary ability to turn even the simplest moment into a spectacle. She was known quietly among residents as the neighborhood Karen. From the moment the children ran into the yard, Karen watched. Her blinds twitched. Her porch light flicked on despite the bright morning sun. She hovered there, irritated before anything had even happened. The children weren't loud, nor careless, nor disrespectful. They were simply laughing while tossing a soft foam ball back and forth. But to Karen, laughter was noise, joy was disruption, and children were trouble waiting to happen. The parent, busy inside preparing lunch, never noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere outside. She didn't notice Karen stepping out of her house and marching across her driveway. She didn't notice the intensity of Karen's expression or the way she pointed at the children as if scolding them for a crime. All she knew was that the peaceful morning was about to transform into something far more complicated. The children stood frozen as Karen towered over them. She chastised them harshly, accusing them of disturbing her peace, claiming they were being intentionally disruptive. Even without hearing the words, anyone could see the hostility in the way she waved her hands and leaned forward as if trying to intimidate them. The children, frightened and confused, dropped their ball and backed away, unsure of how to respond to such sudden anger. Inside the house, the parent remained unaware. The only sign that anything was wrong came when the children finally rushed back indoors, shaken and quiet. She noticed their nervous expressions and the way they clung to her side, but before she could ask what happened, they simply said they no longer wanted to play outside. It was unusual, but she didn't press them. She assumed maybe they were tired, or perhaps the weather had gotten too warm. The truth didn't reveal itself until much later. The turning point came when she checked the activity on her doorbell camera later in the evening, something she did occasionally out of habit more than suspicion. But this time, she paused. There was unusual motion detection recorded earlier in the afternoon, right around the time the kids had been outside. She tapped the video, expecting to see a delivery driver or maybe a passing dog. Instead, she saw Karen. The footage showed everything from the moment she crossed her driveway to the exact second she berated the children. It showed her posture, aggressive and unprovoked. It showed her gestures, accusatory and pointed. It showed the children stepping back in fear. It captured every detail with a level of clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. The parent felt her stomach tighten. Slowly, the pieces fell into place. The children hadn't simply decided to come inside, they had been frightened. And not by another child or a misunderstanding among friends, but by an adult who had taken it upon herself to police something as harmless as children playing. The more the parent watched, the more anger and disbelief simmered beneath her calm exterior. She knew Karen had a reputation. She had heard whispers about her complaining to the HOA about trash cans placed half an inch too far left, or of harassing dog owners for letting pets walk too close to her lawn. But she had always assumed the stories were exaggerated. She believed people tended to inflate drama when talking about difficult neighbors. But now she understood the truth. Karen was not just difficult. She was unreasonable. And she had targeted her children. For the next hour, the parent replayed the footage multiple times, analyzing every moment. She noticed the way Karen waited until she thought no adults were watching. She noticed the overblown reaction to normal childlike behavior. She noticed the way Karen walked away afterward with a self-satisfied expression, as if she believed she had done something righteous. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate intimidation, and the more she watched, the more she realized she couldn't let it go. Not because she wanted conflict, but because she knew if she stayed silent, Karen would only grow bolder. She might confront the children again. She might escalate her behavior. She might even report them to the HOA with exaggerated complaints, painting them as troublemakers. The parent refused to allow that to happen, but she also understood confronting Karen directly would only make things worse. People like Karen thrived on confrontation. They fed on it like fuel. So instead, the parent decided to take the footage to the one place where Karen believed she held power, the HOA board. If Karen thought she could intimidate children and get away with it, she was about to learn a very different lesson. By early evening, the parent began drafting an email to the HOA board. She remained calm, professional, and factual. No accusations, no insults, just a clear explanation of what happened and the attached video evidence. She described how uncomfortable and unsafe her children now felt, and how unacceptable it was for another homeowner to behave in such a hostile manner toward minors. She didn't embellish or dramatize. She didn't need to. The footage alone told the entire story. She sent the email with a deep breath, unsure of what would come next. HOA boards could be unpredictable, sometimes helpful, sometimes indifferent, sometimes defensive. But one thing was certain, they could no longer ignore Karen's behavior. Not when the evidence was so damning. As the parent closed her laptop, she looked out the window toward Karen's house. The blinds were shut tight, hiding the woman inside. But the parent no longer felt intimidated. She no longer felt small. She felt prepared, and somewhere inside her, a quiet certainty formed. This was only the beginning. Because once the HOA saw the footage, once the community learned the truth about what happened, the quiet suburban peace Karen clung to so tightly was about to unravel. The email traveled faster than expected. By the next morning, the parent woke to 3 notifications, one from the HOA president, one from a board member she barely knew, and one from a member of the compliance committee. Each message was short, but all shared the same underlying tone: surprise, concern, and urgency. The footage had rattled them. The HOA president suggested an immediate review. The compliance committee scheduled an emergency meeting for the following evening, inviting both the parent and Karen to attend. The board claimed this was procedure, an opportunity for both sides to clarify the situation. But beneath the formal language, the parents sensed something else. This wasn't just a simple review. This was going to be a reckoning. Throughout the day, whispers spread through the neighborhood, not from the parent, but from the HOA board itself. Several members privately admitted they were already familiar with Karen's history of complaints, though none had ever seen her behavior caught so clearly, so unmistakably, and in front of children. The video unsettled them. It was one thing to deal with endless emails from a disgruntled homeowner. It was another to see a grown adult loom over children with such hostility. The parent tried to focus on daily tasks, but the upcoming meeting rested like a weight on her mind. She didn't fear conflict, but she knew Karen would never admit fault. Karen would deny, twist, and spin every detail until she felt justified. That was how she operated. And yet, for the first time, the parent felt confidence rather than dread. The truth wasn't a matter of opinion. This time, everything was recorded. By late afternoon, the neighborhood began to stir with visible tension. People glanced toward Karen's house as they walked by. Curtains shifted. Conversations between neighbors stopped abruptly when she stepped outside. Even Karen herself seemed oddly aware of the shift. She exited her home only once that day, sweeping her porch with exaggerated purpose, eyes darting around as if searching for the source of the sudden change. The parent prepared for the meeting with quiet determination. She gathered everything, a printed summary of the incident, screenshots from the video showing Karen's approach, and, most importantly, the actual footage saved on a USB drive. She wasn't going into this unprepared. She was determined to make sure the truth was undeniable. When evening arrived, the HOA clubhouse filled more quickly than usual. Emergency meetings rarely drew much attention, but word had spread that something significant was about to unfold. Homeowners arrived early, hoping for seats close enough to observe every expression and every reaction. By the time the meeting officially began, the room was packed with folding chairs, murmurs, and curious faces. Karen arrived last. She entered with her shoulders squared and her expression sour, as if she had been inconvenienced by the entire situation. She scanned the room with suspicion, immediately noticing the unusual number of attendees. Yet rather than appearing intimidated, she seemed to interpret the crowd as evidence of support. She lifted her chin, convinced she was walking into a room ready to validate her actions. The HOA president called the meeting to order with a tone far more serious than usual. He explained the purpose of the gathering, emphasizing that the matter involved potential misconduct by a homeowner and a complaint submitted with video evidence. The room quieted. Every eye turned to the parent. She recounted the events calmly. She described how her children had come inside visibly shaken. She explained how she later discovered the footage on her doorbell camera. She outlined her concerns, the intimidation, the unprovoked hostility, and the fear now instilled in her children. She spoke not with anger, but with clarity, a tone that resonated deeply with the audience. When she finished, the president nodded, then inserted the USB drive into the projector. As the footage played, the room grew so silent that even the faint hum of the air conditioner seemed loud. Every second of the video played out on the large screen, Karen marching across her driveway, her harsh gestures, her looming posture over the children, their retreat into fear. The expressions of the audience shifted from curiosity to shock, then to disapproval. The parent didn't need to see Karen's reaction to know she felt exposed. But when she glanced over, she saw a mixture of outrage and panic flickering across Karen's face, an expression not of remorse but of defense. The footage ended. A long, heavy pause followed. The HOA president cleared his throat and addressed Karen directly. He asked her to explain her behavior. For the first time all evening, Karen spoke. Her explanation was convoluted, deflective, and desperate. She claimed the children were being disruptive. She insisted she was merely protecting neighborhood peace. She argued that she had every right to confront them. She even attempted to blame the children, portraying them as unruly despite the video clearly contradicting her narrative, but the tone of the room had shifted. Her excuses didn't land. Her attempts to regain control fell flat. People exchanged glances that hinted at disbelief, glances she noticed and seemed increasingly unsettled by. The HOA board members asked pointed questions. Why had she approached the children instead of contacting their parent? Why had she reacted with such aggression over harmless play? Why did her version not match the objective video evidence? Karen's responses wavered. Her frustration grew visible. Her voice tightened. She repeated the same claims, each time sounding more strained. It was clear she wasn't defending her actions, she was clinging to them. Finally, the board members excused themselves briefly to deliberate. They disappeared into a side room, leaving the audience buzzing with quiet speculation. The parent felt her heart beat slow as she waited. She had done her part. Whatever happened now was beyond her control. When the board returned, the president's expression made the decision clear before he even spoke. He announced that Karen's behavior constituted harassment under HOA policy. He cited the section addressing homeowner conduct, particularly regarding interactions with minors. He explained that she would receive a formal written warning, mandatory behavioral review, and restrictions preventing her from approaching any residents' children directly in the future. Repeated violations, he warned, would result in escalating penalties, including possible legal action. The room absorbed the decision, some residents nodding in agreement. The parent felt a wave of relief, not triumph, but justice. It wasn't about winning. It was about making sure her children felt safe again. Karen, however, looked stunned. The shock in her eyes quickly twisted into resentment. She rose abruptly, muttering about biased decisions and unfair treatment, then stormed out of the meeting room without another word. But as the door slammed behind her, everyone in the room understood something important. This wasn't over. Karen would not let the matter rest quietly. She would retaliate, one way or another. Her pride wouldn't allow otherwise, and the parent knew, with unsettling certainty, that the next chapter of this conflict would be far more chaotic. Karen's exit from the HOA meeting marked the beginning of an entirely different kind of tension in the neighborhood, one that could be felt even in the stillness of early mornings and the quiet hum of evenings. Something had shifted. The board's ruling had embarrassed her publicly, and for someone who prided herself on maintaining authority, the humiliation was unbearable. She withdrew from public view for the first few days, but everyone sensed the storm brewing. The parent noticed subtle signs almost immediately. The morning after the meeting, a fresh letter was taped to her mailbox, anonymous, but the handwriting unmistakable. The message warned her to control her children and threatened vague consequences if she didn't. It wasn't signed, of course, but the dramatic tone and the jagged strokes of the pen made the author clear. She didn't respond. She didn't even remove the letter right away. She simply photographed it, documented it, and placed it in a folder with the other evidence accumulating around Karen's behavior. She had learned quickly that silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation. Over the next week, the tension escalated. Complaints began flooding into the HOA office, all filed by the same person. They accused the parent of everything from violating landscaping guidelines to improperly storing trash bins. Every claim was exaggerated, petty, or blatantly false. The HOA president emailed her directly to apologize, noting that they were obligated to log complaints but were aware of the pattern. He encouraged her not to worry, but Karen didn't stop there. She stood outside her house more often, watching with a cold stare whenever the children played, even quietly, even briefly, even with her parent present. It was as if she wanted the children to know she was still watching, still seething, still angry that anyone dared challenge her. The parent refused to let fear dictate her actions. She allowed her children outside only when she could supervise, but she made sure they continued to enjoy their yard. She refused to let Karen steal their sense of safety. Still, she remained vigilant. The doorbell camera captured Karen loitering near the sidewalk more than once. Each time, the parents saved the footage. One afternoon, however, something unexpected happened, something that changed the entire course of the conflict. A delivery van stopped in front of the parents' house. The driver knocked on Karen's door by mistake, holding a package addressed to a different home. Karen, without checking the label, snatched the box out of his hands, assuming it was hers. When the driver realized the mistake and mentioned it, Karen dismissed him rudely and slammed the door shut, refusing to return the package. Unfortunately for her, the entire interaction, every second of it, took place in clear view of the parents' doorbell camera, which caught the angle perfectly. Later that day, the rightful owner of the package, a mild-mannered neighbor 2 houses down, walked the street looking confused. When he explained that his delivery was marked as received, the parent checked her camera footage and immediately understood what had happened. She asked for the package description, confirmed it matched the stolen box, and then offered to send him the video. What happened next spread across the neighborhood faster than whispers ever could. Word traveled from one homeowner to another. The stolen package wasn't a misunderstanding, it was deliberate. Residents who had defended Karen in the past suddenly grew silent. Those who already disliked her felt validated. And the neighbor whose package had been taken sent the footage directly to the HOA, this time bypassing any formal meeting and going straight to an emergency compliance review. Karen was furious. She tried to argue that she had not stolen anything, that she had protected the package, that the driver made a mistake. But the footage told a different story. The HOA board reviewed it, recognized the pattern of harassment, retaliation, and misconduct, and decided this incident crossed a line that could no longer be ignored. The parent didn't even need to attend the meeting this time. The evidence stood alone. Within 48 hours, the HOA issued its strongest penalty yet. Karen received an official notice placing her on probationary status, a step just short of legal action. She was fined heavily for package interference, warned that future violations would result in immediate escalation, and instructed to cease all contact, direct or indirect, with the parent and her children. The consequences were far greater than Karen anticipated. The notice was delivered publicly by a board member, and though the HOA tried to handle it discreetly, neighbors saw. Word spread. People whispered. Karen's image as the neighborhood enforcer shattered completely, but the final blow came unexpectedly, from someone Karen least suspected, her own next-door neighbor, who had tolerated her behavior for years. He stepped forward with his own collection of evidence, months of footage showing Karen trespassing onto his property to measure his lawn height, inspecting his trash cans, and photographing his home at night. He had never filed a complaint before, choosing to avoid drama, but Karen's harassment had gone too far. If she was finally being held accountable, he wanted to make sure the board saw her full pattern of behavior. Armed with multiple homeowners' evidence, the HOA escalated the matter beyond their internal system. They submitted a formal community conduct violation for legal review, a step rarely taken and always reserved for the most problematic residents. It wasn't an eviction, but it was a legal pathway that allowed the HOA to pursue injunctions, fines, and strict behavioral restrictions. Karen's fury erupted into a meltdown that echoed through the neighborhood. She shouted at board members, accused everyone of conspiring against her, and made wild claims about being targeted. But this time, no one believed her. No one defended her. No one supported her. For the first time, Karen found herself alone. In the days that followed, the neighborhood slowly regained its calm. Children returned to playing outside. Homeowners walked past Karen's house without fear of confrontation. People began greeting the parent warmly, grateful she had stood her ground and helped expose behavior that had quietly poisoned the community for years. As for Karen, she retreated into her home, blinds drawn, curtains closed, avoiding the outside world that no longer catered to her self-appointed authority. Whether she would change was unclear, but one thing was certain: the neighborhood would never again tolerate her unchecked behavior. The parent watched her children play peacefully in the yard one bright afternoon. For the first time in weeks, their laughter felt light and unburdened. There were no tense glances toward Karen's house, no fear that someone would come storming across the driveway to ruin their joy. Peace had finally returned, and though the parent knew life in an HOA community was never without its occasional drama, she also knew she had something far more powerful than conflict or fear: the truth, the evidence, and the quiet courage to protect her family. The neighborhood, once shaken by one woman's hostility, was calmer than ever.